In today's gospel, we have the story of blind Bartimaeus. And for the Gospel of Mark, it's the last miracle story before Jesus enters into the triumphal entry into Jerusalem. For the Gospel of John, it's the story of raising of Lazarus. So a little bit more of a familiar story. But one of the things about blind Bartimaeus, it's not only a healing story, but it's also a discipleship story. Just like the raising of Lazarus is not just about, isn't it wonderful that Lazarus came back to life, but that Jesus has power over sin and death. So what we see from Jesus' encounter with Bartimaeus, I always think it's kind of like in the Gospel of John, where they said that he had to go through Samaria to see the woman at the well. I think he had to go through Jericho to see Bartimaeus, because while Jericho is only about 20 miles northeast of Jerusalem, it's not that easy. It's not a walk in the park to get there. You're going from 800 feet below sea level to 2,400 feet above sea level in just a 20 mile range. So you're having a lot of range. It's not easy to do. One of the things about Israel is that Israel is very hilly. So, there are flat parts, but a lot of it is very hilly. So if you're in around Jerusalem in that area, it's not easy if you have mobility issues to get around, because there are a lot of steps, there are a lot of hills. So Jesus comes into Jericho. Bartimaeus must hear that Jesus is coming. He yells out. The people tell him to be quiet because, they think probably he's just asking for alms. So, he's they're like, be quiet, be quiet. But he yells out all the more. He won't take no for an answer. So he's very persistent. And so in his persistence, Jesus calls him over. And the crowd, which has been shushing him and telling him to be quiet, now has a great line, take courage, get up, he's calling you. So they have that great line in there about Jesus, take courage, he's calling you. So, and very important. And, just like, when Eli said to Samuel, say, speak, Lord, your servant is listening. Same too. But Jesus asked him, what does he want? And the same question that was posed to James and John when they said, we want us to do whatever, we ask of you, would you do it? And he said, what do you want? Basically, what do you want? What do you wish for? But while James and John were looking for, glory, and when Jesus comes into his kingdom, Bartimaeus is looking for healing. And so he says he wants to be healed. And it's interesting because he kind of symbolically throws off that old life before coming to Jesus. He takes the cloak which had held his alms during the day and kept him warm at night, because Jericho is a desert area. So it gets very hot during the day and kind of cool at night with the desert. So he had symbolically in a way, thrown off that old life in coming to Jesus. And then when he is healed, instead of going back, like we would think about, I'm going back to, my friends, my parents, all these people, and say, come on, let's have a great party, because I'm healed. And that was the same thing with the healing of the 10 lepers. The 9 of them probably when they realized they were healed, they were like, oh, this is fantastic. Let's go to see, my family. I haven't seen my family in years because I've been separated and isolated being a leper. So same too with Bartimaeus, being, blind, he was kind of marginalized and having to beg for alms, but now he's able to see, so he's able to be able to work on his own. So he's now, you would think he would go and say, celebrate and have a great time. But instead, what does he do? He gets up and he joins Jesus on the way. And that way leads to Jerusalem, which will initially be that triumphal entry, but in the end will be suffering and death. And so when we think about Bartimaeus, certainly here's a person who's been tried by suffering, certainly a person who had deprivation because of his blindness, and yet is willing to follow Jesus on the way, not willing necessarily to get up and say, well, isn't it wonderful? I'm going to have this great party, but instead following Jesus as the disciple. And so one of the things that we can take from blind Bartimaeus is really that one may not be healed from, injuries or healed from, childhood illnesses or things like that, or healed of blindness or deafness or anything like that. But one of the things that we're all kind of healed from is the sin that's taken effect on our life. And so as we have that healing from sin, we too want to join Jesus on the road. And whether the road leads to the joy of the triumphal entry or the sorrow of the passion and death, we want to join Jesus on that road. Thanks, and God bless.